Welcome to the AMATIC 2018 webinar series. Today's webinar is Past, Present, and Future Developmental Mathematics with Jack Rotman. This webinar is sponsored by the Developmental Mathematics Committee. Please note that the views expressed by the presenter are not necessarily the views of AMATIC. Commercial products mentioned by the presenters are not endorsed by AMATIC. McGraw-Hill is our sponsor of the webinar series this year. Thank you very much, McGraw-Hill. And without further ado, I'm just going to go ahead and turn this right over to Jack.
Okay. So welcome everybody. I'm glad you're here. I'm very glad you're with me today. My basic message involves the idea that for us to have influence on the future and hope for our students, we need to understand where we come from and where we want to go. Much of our history, we have either been continuing on the same old path or we've been reacting to outside forces. Based on an understanding of our context, including identifying problems that are important to us, we are in a stronger position to have influence on the future. So I'm going to be talking about connecting past and future. So first thing to look at is maybe some ideas about the past. I came up with some quotes you might find interesting. There's one, Corrie ten Boom is a Dutch woman from World War II, if you want to look it up. There's George Bernard Shaw, one of the most quoted people in the world. And another one you may not be familiar with, Russell Brand, a very pithy little comment. This is kind of interesting, isn't it? The future is just now, but later. But we often lose track of the fact that we're in a continuum that doesn't happen spontaneously all of a sudden. It's a progression. So you might think about those as we go through the webinar. So I want to start with this core idea that's about the mathematics. So I use the word silly here instead of a more confrontational word. We often lose track of what we're doing. We think about getting students to a certain endpoint and not thinking about the mathematics as much as maybe we should. I'll come back to that a couple times. So first I want to paint a picture of where developmental mathematics is now in 2018. The basic theme of our age is minimization. Certainly an idea that we are familiar with in mathematics. A smaller footprint for developmental mathematics. One trend is co-requisite remediation, where there's no footprint size. Trend B is pathways, where you focus on smaller footprints for some students, not all. The third trend is replacement of traditional developmental math courses with modern courses, where you change the footprint for all students. And of course, another trend now is everybody's an expert. College presidents, system chancellors, legislators, governors, anybody who thinks about our work is now an expert on it. So there's three things listed there. The first poll deals with which of those you prefer. So there you are. So take a few seconds and click on one. Don't worry about perfect answer. A few seconds we'll close the poll and see where everybody voted. Just be interested to see.
Yeah, you guys can commit. It doesn't have your name on it. All right, it looks like everybody who's going to vote has voted. I'm going to go ahead and share those results with you. Jack, it looks like 24% of the participants today picked A, the co-requisite remediation. 39% picked pathways. That was the highest one. 18% picked replace traditional courses, and 18% picked none of these.
Okay, well, that's interesting. Thank you for participating. I wasn't sure quite what to expect. It was nice to see diverse answers. So let's go on. I want to go through some history, and we'll go through this part fairly quickly, so you're familiar with some of this information, and we'll get back to the present. Originally, developmental mathematics was a kind of rehash of high school math for students who did not complete the college prep work. So the high school math courses were cloned, and this happened to be in the period that was reacting to the new math era of the early 60s. So it was kind of very traditional in its orientation. Rationale at the beginning was getting students ready for a college algebra course or equivalent. Well, that point is pretty important in our work right now because it's led to some problems. So what we've mentioned this college algebra thing several times today. So that model made some sense back then. This is a chart showing how many students, what proportion of students finished Algebra 2 in high school, well, primarily at age 17 years. So it's not everybody. Some of these students had another year to go yet. You can see it went from 33% back then to 76% in the most recent data. So you can see the sources here if you want to look at this later. It'll be in the recording. So most of our students don't have this big gap that we once were trying to address. So maybe our model then doesn't make as much sense as it once did. The things we tried back then were structured around these grade levels, less than 8th grade, 8th grade, 9th grade, 10th grade, 11th grade, very grade dependent curriculum. The things we tried then were mostly about how we deliver that stuff, not what. We tried workbooks, program instruction books, audio tapes, and books in 3 colors. Some of you are old enough to remember books in 2 colors, namely black and white. It was a big thing back then to have a 3rd color in the book. It's all about the materials. So I'm going to throw in some samples of books a couple times today, and this is one just for fun, see what things used to look like. This is a 1970s book, 1972. You notice 2 things in a circle there. Slide rule was the computing device, the technology of the era. It's fun to think about. I don't remember how I used one. And the other thing, more importantly, is minimum of words. So the books at that point strove to get rid of all necessary words in a document. And you can still see that in many of our textbooks today. So we move a little bit further, we get to the 80s where we focus on arithmetic skills. We didn't like these old things, handheld calculators, very much. If we had low pass rates, our response was, well, let's add another math course, which does a lot to lower percentage of students completing. If students had problems, we said it was student learning problems. We kind of blamed them. And overall, we had a back to basics attitude in this era, skills and procedures to reinforce this anti-new math work that we talked about earlier. In the sample here, a couple of books from that era. There's a note on one if you want to see what a student wrote to me. Doesn't make a lot of difference today, but it's kind of interesting. So inside, this is what the book looked like. Mostly saying things, examples, and practice. No words to connect concepts, very little development of ideas. Not much of a textbook. Mostly statements, examples, and practice. In the 90s, this was just after the NCTM standards came out, which created large changes overall in the K-12 world, the small changes for us. It's also the era when graphing calculators became available at reasonable prices. Most of us did all or nothing, and most of us, in fact, did the nothing part. There's an interesting opinion piece here by Ed Lafbaum called Time for Change in Developmental Education. And you might want to go look that up. Some of the things that Ed says and the other messages back then were similar to what you see now in recent documents, Common Vision and Mathematical Sciences 2025. Those are 2 things. If you haven't read them, you'll want to go see. Go look at them. Our curriculum still focused on the old stuff, getting students ready for college algebra. We were not changing very much at all, except in all this stuff was delivered. So here's another textbook, nice cover, very artistic. Inside, though, was still declarative statements, examples, and practice. It wasn't very modern, except for the artistic work on the cover. In the late 90s, this was after the first Atlantic standards, we had pockets of reform and revolution, grant writing for textbooks in particular. And those things were presented to us at conferences, but few of us actually did much with them, even though some of those efforts were similar to the current replacement work that we might be involved with. So just covers for these books, don't have actual copies of them. So you can look at these later. These didn't do a whole lot in the market. They're still around to some extent. They're interesting to look at. In the early 2000s, I call this the publisher's golden age, not because there were so many publishers, but because they were doing a lot. This is when they developed a lot of digital supplements, which are supplemental, not the main thing. There was a focus more on commonly used content, so actually went somewhat backwards in this period. So less reform book, more on traditional stuff. With graphic calculator, we also retreated a little bit in general in this era. We had fewer graphic calculator embedded textbooks. And more importantly, few of us thought of anything besides college algebra, which is set us up for some bad things to happen that I'll be talking about in a minute. So here's another textbook. This is more recent, so I have some pages from inside. You can see this digital is supplement, these icons at the top. It's kind of quaint to have those in the book, isn't it? We wouldn't see those in the books now. Right now, the printed copy is the supplement, not the digital. But the book itself is still declarative statements, examples, and practice. When they do include the graphic calculator, often it's just using numeric methods to check symbolic procedures. It's a good question whether that's a good use of technology or not. I suspect the answer is primarily not. So it's interesting, the books haven't changed a whole lot in this whole time period, except for some use of graphic calculator in some books. The second round of the Atlantic standards came out in 2006. Unfortunately, that material focused on the process more than the curriculum, which meant we had an implicit acceptance of the old traditional remediation structure. It was an opportunity that we missed. And we, in fact, still thought of college algebra as the target for most of our developmental courses. And this is when the policy influencers, Complete College America, for example, began to be interested in developmental mathematics. We've missed a couple of opportunities, and now we're getting to the point where we're going to pay a consequence for it. There's a little side note here about NCAT. If you don't know, this is National Center for Academic Transformation. For a while, this is a very big thing. It's a little less now, but some of us still use these ideas. In general, those is isolated from the worker profession. I still want to come back to this idea that it's about the mathematics, not so much about what color the book is in and whether we have this page in that book or not. It's still about the mathematics that students will need. We have the curricular year in 2010. If most of us were around then and had some idea of what we're talking about here. The Carnegie Foundation began their pathways. The Dennis Center picked up their Foundations of Mathematical Reasoning course. The Mag New Life Project had the Math Literacy course. All three of those courses have the same genetic material. They were developed in parallel, sometimes using the same people. The New Life Project had this forgotten sibling called algebraic literacy that we will want to come back to. There's a famous quote here by Yuri Treisman, "The Joyful Conspiracy." Hopefully you've been willing to be part of this joyful conspiracy as I have. And this is when many of us began thinking about something else besides college algebra. It was really too late for us. We need to get back and do more work now, so we didn't think about this early enough in our history. So hopefully you're thinking about those questions and pop them in the Q&A. We'll get to those in a couple minutes. Prior to 2010, we did not get much attention in developmental mathematics. Most people were happy to have us do the work without bothering them about it. These policy influencers had an intent to disrupt the continuity in our profession. So they had specific solutions they sold to colleges and systems leaders. They've done an amazingly good job at doing that. And it shouldn't have been that easy for them to do, but it was because of what we had not done. And their focus was on non or anti-college algebra. And they could do that because we ignored those other things too much of our history. So let's go back to those present things. Three options: co-requisite remediation. This is more stuff in statistics and liberal arts, math, or quantitative reasoning. Sometimes in a college algebra course, but not so much there. And there's messages in that as well. There's some quotes here about the data. I'm not sure if the data is all as good as it sounds to be here. In some ways, I don't especially care about that. It doesn't seem that important whether it works for these off the beaten path courses. because college algebra is devalued. The idea is to get done with math, and that was an institutional priority. The second option, pathways, you're looking at replacing a traditional algebra course for some students, depending on their program. So those are non-STEM students in general. The STEM students generally got the same old courses, even arithmetic courses, which is obsolete stuff. Mathematics has changed an awful lot in the past 50 years, but what we teach to students has not changed very much at all. In this pathways work, there's an institutional policy of algebra avoidance. And I wonder if we as mathematicians are happy with that as a policy. So the third option is replacement. If you look at the mathematical needs for students at the basic level for college, math literacy, it doesn't really matter what they're going into. They have the same needs for proportional reasoning, algebraic reasoning, working with units, quantities, converting inputs and outputs, dependent, independent, graphing. All those things are common for almost all students. At the next level, in-read algebra is not what we need today. That's an old course from 50 years ago. We need something more like algebraic literacy. And we certainly should eliminate arithmetic and pre-algebra for college students. Their replacement strategy supports college algebra as well as other mathematics. In fact, the college algebra course is another thing that should be replaced. And all of this replacement work is geared towards supporting upward mobility for the current programs with high demand in society, not the old jobs that are no longer there. Teaching students arithmetic does not help them get a job in general anymore. They need more than that. So it's a good point to stop to see if we have any questions. It's been a while I've been talking. I don't like to talk this much. So what questions do we have?
So, Jack, you do have one question, and it is, what is the difference between college algebra and high school algebra?
That's a great question. Traditionally, college algebra was defined to be algebra taught to college students, which doesn't really answer that person's question, does it? There's an expectation that college algebra is part of a Precalculus sequence, which means it's a little higher level of expectation, perhaps, than a high school course. But there's still an awful lot of overlap. If you look at the Common Core outcomes for K-12 algebra, you'll see a lot of the topics we cover in a college algebra course. In some ways, college algebra is now a remedial math class. So that's a great question. Is that a decent answer? Is that the only question?
So that is the only question, and the person has not said that you did not give a decent answer.
So the absence of a negative is a good thing. Okay.
Exactly. Oh, we have a long one here. Okay, it says students in Dev Math have weaknesses in other than math variables, which play an important role in the success of these courses. These weaknesses bubble up much more forcefully in a math class. Is there work that summarizes what has been done over the decades regarding these variables? And then it says new trends seem to address curriculum, instruction, and material, but not these variables. If curriculum, instruction, and material were enough, then after so many combinations, we would have stumbled upon a good one. There was some mention of these variables in quant-way literature.
Yeah, you're right about that. Yeah. The Carnegie Foundation has done a really good job of pulling these other variables. And I wish that we would adopt more of those things as a profession. Certainly the materials are not enough, the content is not enough. The challenge is identifying what the core issues are for students and developing things that make a difference to them. Things like grit and perseverance, problem-solving skills, linguistic issues, all those things play a role. So we should address those, and Carnegie Foundation has probably done the best job of articulating what those issues are and some resources to cope with them. Certainly we need something more than writing skills or study skills as a add-on textbook for our classes. It's not enough. Okay, so let's go on. We can come back to more questions a little bit. I want to talk for a minute about college mathematics. This is the college credit courses that students take. This is also very obsolete. The college algebra course we talked about is a descendant of a 19th century course taught as a liberal arts math class. It's had some upgrades done for precalculus work, but it hasn't really been redesigned anytime since then, since the 19th century. Calculus is, in some ways, is even more rigid in its history. It hasn't changed much since the first Thomas book. All those courses need some critical thinking to focus on more modern content delivery, addressing what students need today, not what the mechanical engineers of the 1960s needed. So the replacement is kind of a first step towards improving all of our courses. I got some references on this slide. If you don't have a lot of this information, there's some sources there you can go read. That's not the basic point of this webinar. But I wanted to make sure you knew these resources and had a chance to look at them later. So I want to take a minute to do some more informal discussion of where we are and what other people see. This is kind of a summary of what we see in developmental mathematics. If we add more math courses, we get more students ready for college work. So if we add a third course or a fourth course, that means we're doing better. Unfortunately, what other people see, the policy influencers, Community College America, Jobs for the Future, what they see is this picture. More developmental math courses means most students are blocked for completion. So the first graph you can recognize as a linear piecewise function. This one is, what's this called, exponential decay? Which one of these will win an argument? This is not an argument that we can win. Exponential decay is stronger, and there's no way we can make our image look better than this exponential decay. We've got to change the argument. Stop using the words remedial and developmental. And more importantly, we've got to articulate a positive message about the effective and modern preparation courses that we can deliver for all students, not just non-STEM. So something like this, one course at most in pre-college prep courses can get students ready at their 90% rate. Those 90% of the students have 0 or 1 pre-college math course before they hit their college math course. So it looks something like this. You also recognize this. This is kind of a logistic growth model where there's an upper limit, something approaching 90%, starting with an initial value of about 50 to 60%. So I wonder if you think this looks like a reasonable thing. So here's what we do at my college to achieve something close to that picture. We've replaced all of our developmental math courses except for intermediate algebra, and that's just a matter of time. Our algebra, beginning algebra, pre-algebra, and arithmetic courses are replaced by math literacy. We have an algebra course that follows that, or we continue in intermediate algebra for those that place into it. So every student here has a maximum of 2 pre-college courses, and most have 1. Either they go from math literacy to the QR course or STAT, or they go from the fast track or intermediate algebra to their STEM path. And as a note here about the data, 60% of our current enrollment is in credit math courses. And it was at 30%. So if we need to come back to this, the next slide is a picture, the graph of that enrollment data. So you can see the traditional standard here is 30% in credit-bearing courses. We're at 60% and growing right now. And this is just based on curricular changes, not changes in standards for getting into anything. So again, this is our current model of what we're doing. And this is another point. If you have questions, we could pause for a minute and see if you have any questions before I go on and talk about something else.
There aren't any questions in the question and answer box at the moment, but I think something ended in the chat box. And it says, let's see, I love your emphasis on changing the argument because it acknowledges the political context of our work as mathematics educators.
Yeah, true.
Oh, okay. Some popped up now because you opened the door.
Okay.
Oh, now they're flying in. Okay, here we go. The first question is, what placement test did you use at your college?
Well, placement test for us is right now is AccuPlacer or SAT. Michigan is an SAT state, so a lot of our students come in with that. That places mostly into transfer credit-bearing courses. AccuPlacer is used for developmental placement and for some college level placement. We're pretty happy with that combination. It works well for us.
Okay, one question, I think it's further down the list, but I'm going to take it right now because I think it's important to go on. And the question is, what is math literacy?
Oh, great question. The words are a little bit tricky. One of the things I've run into is we sometimes abbreviate this course as math lit. So we turn this into a bookstore and they translate it into math literature, which is not the same thing at all. Literacy refers to basic understanding. So this is a basic reasoning, proportional reasoning using percents, scales, ratios, algebraic reasoning using variables, expressions, knowing about inputs and outputs, basic concepts of graphing, slope, placing points on a graph, was linear or not. It crosses a lot of pre-algebra and basic algebra topics, presented in a way that emphasizes reasoning and understanding more than just procedures. So it's literacy refers to the ability to use information in a quantitative way.
Okay, so a question about...
Another question?
Yeah, we've got tons of them, Jack. So another question is, how is this model different than pathways?
Bit different.
Different than, the pathways, the buzzword, like we've got pathways.
Yeah. So everybody uses the word pathways. The traditional pathways idea is that you maintain a traditional beginning algebra course, and for students that don't need college algebra, you put them in a math literacy course, which prepares them for statistics or something. So in this model, we take out the beginning algebra course entirely. We dropped that a year ago and really don't miss it very much. Everybody goes through math literacy if they don't have the basic algebra knowledge. So people that are a little bit algebraic proficient go into this fast check algebra course. So there's some elements a little bit like pathways here, but it's a very different application. It's really, everybody gets this math literacy course as opposed to some students. So we're all about improving our curriculum, whether the students go into STEM or not STEM.
Okay, there are several questions about those two courses that are in the yellow, the fast track algebra and the intermediate algebra. What is the difference between those two classes?
Yeah, another good question. Fast track algebra started off as a combined beginning and intermediate algebra course. Back when we had both courses, we still offer this class as a one semester review of all of algebra prior to college algebra. Intermediate algebra is essentially the second half of that work. It's a traditional course right now. So the only difference between those courses is the starting point. Fast track algebra begins at sort of a beginning algebra level and goes on. Intermediate algebra begins at the second half of that level.
Okay. In what year did you introduce your QR and the stats classes as alternatives to college algebra?
That's a good question too. Lansing Community College has been a little bit different in this for a long time. 10 years ago, we developed our quantitative reasoning class with a beginning algebra prerequisite. At that time, it was not very popular because we didn't do a good job connecting with the disciplines, the programs that could use it. And then 4 years ago, we redesigned our intro stat class to also have a beginning algebra prerequisite. So we've had a fairly long history of offering those courses with a minimum of prerequisite required. So that we've had a little advantage in this compared to some colleges. We never had a requirement for intermediate algebra before those classes.
One of the attendees wants to know if you allow calculator use in math literacy.
Oh, we not only allow it, we require it. We do have some problems in that class with students pulling out the calculator to add -6 plus -7. And we try to talk to students about that not being such a good thing. But we want to use the calculator, we use the graphing calculator, we want to use it to explore inputs and outputs and graphing with them. We don't want to take away a computing device just for the sake of pretending that we're going to improve their numeric skills. Most work has shown that letting students or requiring a student not to use a calculator when they're studying arithmetic or operations does not provide much long-term benefit. So we've given up on that fight. If that's important to somebody for an occupation, they will need to address their students' numeric skills directly, though I'm not seeing many places where that's required anymore.
Another question about the computer-based pre-college math emporium models. Do they fit into the scheme or not?
Do they fit in the scheme?
Yeah, in your plan of courses.
Oh, not for us, no. So most of our faculty here are interested in developing reasoning and modeling skills long-term in the program. So we started math literacy with writing linear models for information about initial value and rate of change. And we also do exponential models in that class. And we keep building on that throughout. We don't want to compartmentalize this into a sequence of 60 topics that students have to pass. So we're kind of going the other direction. I think this is where a lot of our colleagues would like to go more in their reasoning and application, a little bit less on isolated skills and procedures.
Okay. One of the attendees is curious about a list of objectives for each of the classes, just to better define it instead of a description, I think.
Yeah, I understand. I honestly don't have enough of them memorized to give you a list right now. However, the Lansing Community College website has public access to our basic course syllabi. So if you go to lcc.edu and search for course syllabi, you're going to get a link to the place where you can see these for yourself and print them if you want. Better than me reading them to you.
Okay. Probably.
Yeah.
This is more of a comment, but I'm not sure if there might be a question in there for clarification. It says this course flow is not very different from what I've seen from other institutions, from what other campuses offer, except for that the courses don't seem to be remedial, like 100 level courses.
Yeah, it is a comment, but it kind of invites a reply. The numbering is a political issue. Most of my colleagues don't really care about the numbers. They originally were 0 level for developmental classes here, and then we went to all 100 level for developmental classes. And we're going to go back to 0 level sometime in the next couple of years. Most of us consider that a trivial issue is nobody expects these courses to transfer. It doesn't really make much difference in that round. So we're fine with the kind of numbering, but you're right. It does make it look like they're college level, but people within the state of Michigan certainly know they're not. Michigan is not like a system state, so we have this luxury of having different numbers per courses.
Yeah.
Any more good questions, Julie?
Nope, that wraps it up, Jack.
Okay, terrific. Good questions, everybody. So let's do a little bit more. This is the enrollment chart. So here's the next poll, the last one. Do you think it's a reasonable goal, one course at most, to get 90% of our students ready for college mathematics? So take 10 seconds or so and give your answer.
I'll give you
We
a
should
few
have
more
some game
seconds.
show music on for this.
Yeah, about half the people have voted so far.
Okay.
Again, commit. We're not taking names.
Yes.
I think they stalled out. I don't think they're going to commit.
Oh, no.
I know. I know. You got about 20% of your participants are not participating. I know.
Was everybody asleep?
Maybe we should take names, Jack.
Yeah.
Okay, I guilted a couple more people into committing there.
Good deal.
Okay, all right. So the results are that 59% of the participants said yes, and 44. Now this is always interesting when it doesn't add up to 100, and you have math people on the webinar. Yeah, so I don't know what happened there. If when I hit it, it somehow it goofs it up. So it doesn't add up to 100.
Well, at least we got some optimism that it's the reasonable thing to aim for. That's good. In some ways, this is a measure of how well the webinar is going for me. I was hoping we'd say at least some support for that. Well, thanks. Oh, I want to show a little projection of what the future might be. And this is not Lansing Community College. I want to make sure you understand this is nowhere right now. This is outside of my head. This is only in my imagination. So imagine a curriculum where students start off in math literacy no matter where they're going. They have a support class if they need it there. If they need STEM work, they go on to an algebraic reasoning class, not in algebra, something more like algebraic literacy, algebraic reasoning. And then they go on to STEM courses. You notice there's different titles there for those STEM courses. So there's some further commentary on this. The co-support classes are for lower placement into each level to give students extra support. This is one of the current things that I think has some good basis of this co-requisite model, embedded support, whatever your institution is calling it. The lower placement levels, as well as the students that get low grades in their prerequisite course, need support. And that is a good model to help them along. So you might wonder why I'm putting these co-support classes where nobody else has them. Everybody else has them up in the quantitative reasoning and statistics realm. But think about the question, what's the problem that's important to us as mathematicians? Do we want students to get done with math quick, or do we want to support as many of them as possible getting through a STEM path? I don't know about you, but I want more students to have this option to go into the STEM field and not get ruled out by their mathematics. So I want more students going through Precalculus. I call this modeling Precalculus because that content is so outdated right now. There's very little numeric work in the class. It's almost all symbolic, procedural. It needs to be updated because our world has changed. Same thing at the calculus level. Do we need 3 calculus courses? Maybe. I don't teach calculus, but I'd like to think we could be more efficient there at the same time that we introduce more numeric methods. The idea that we need to separate numeric methods and modeling into separate classes doesn't make a lot of sense to me. So this is a vision of what the future might be. And this is another good place to stop for questions if you have any.
Yeah, Jack, 3 more came in.
Good deal.
Let's see. So there was some chatter about the poll, and one of the comments about the poll was it was hard to for the attendees, at least, to understand what the no's meant, because, you know, should it be more than 1 class, or the or do the co-rec folks think it should be 0? It was hard to interpret.
Yeah, I understand.
And then also was clarification about the type of course that you were talking about for that 1 course to get everyone to college level.
Yeah, and that would be varying depending on the student. In our case, we have students that place at the intermediate algebra level when they come here, and they get 1 class to get through before their STEM path starts, the next level. We have students that come to us and place at our basic level of math literacy, and they complete that and then take a stat class, and they have 1 course before the college level. So both those would be successes in that model, 1 course or less, as well as all the students that place directly in the college course at the beginning. So that's the intent of 1 course. It may not be the same course for all the students. There are, of course, a few who might need both math literacy and the algebraic reasoning kind of course. Well, that would be a minority of students, as opposed to what happens in the traditional model where the majority of students need 2 or 3 developmental math classes. Hopefully that helps.
So, Jack, I put the link to your Lansing Community College, the link for the syllabi. Are they all in alphabetical order by the name of the course and not by the discipline? Or because they're having a hard time finding the math literacy in the...
Really?
Yeah, what number is it?
Math literacy is Math 105.
105?
Yeah. In Math 106, we offer 2 versions of the class.
Okay. I must have gone right past it too.
Yeah.
I'll keep looking for that and try to put that in the...
If people can't find it,
please send me an
email.
Somebody just found it and they put it in the chat for us.
Great,
awesome.
Excellent. It's
awesome.
Teamwork.
They're trying to help me, right? That's awesome.
It's called cheating, isn't it?
Yeah.
Oh, no, wait a minute.
No, it's not cheating. We are helping each other.
All right.
Okay, we've got another question, and it is just for clarification, what majors have been asking for the quantitative reasoning class as the college level math class required for their students?
The quantitative reasoning course here is very popular with health careers faculty, nursing in particular. This is a little different from some parts of the country where those same programs have taken statistics as their primary math class. What happens here is our nursing students are tested repeatedly on their math skills. and they get flunked out of the program if they fail quizzes on those skills, like converting units is a very typical thing for those quizzes. So in our QR class covers that in detail. So they're very enamored of our QR class. It also includes a little bit of statistics. So it's kind of the best of both worlds for our health careers faculty. And we've got many of other programs that have used it besides that. There's really a long list. I think there are 40 programs at LCC now that require that class.
Wow, that's a lot.
Yeah.
Let's see, a couple of comments that you might want to be aware of. One is that in Texas, nursing students still have to take college algebra. So that's still happening.
Yeah.
College algebra. There was another comment when you were talking about the calculus classes, and it said that treatment of calculus depends much on the articulations with the four-year school, so probably where you're feeding into around you. Would you agree with that?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, definitely. Everybody that takes calculus at community college, by and large, is going to be transferring someplace. So we got to work on this articulation. But saying that's a problem doesn't let us off the hook. We can't say, well, this is a problem, we can't do it because of this transfer issue, and keep saying that for decades at a time. Our students are paying the price for our lack of action. It's time to get talking to our colleagues. Most of them are also frustrated if they are teaching calculus. Of course, at university, a lot of them are researchers. They don't really care. The people that do teach calculus are cared as much as we do.
Right. Another question is about the two different math literacy classes. What's the difference between 105 and 106?
Well, when we dropped our arithmetic courses, we needed something for those students to do. And we didn't want to just put them in the math literacy course without support. So right now, the Math 106 is a 6-credit class, made 6 hours a week instead of 4 hours a week. In addition, we have an embedded tutor class. We actually have some thoughts that maybe we don't really need that extra support, so we're going to keep watching the data and see if it's worth that extra investment, or if we could put them all in the basic math literacy course.
Okay, one more comment, and then I have a question. So the comment was that statistics is actually required for nursing students in the northeast area of Texas. So it's not the whole state of Texas. Just because this is going to be recorded, I don't want people coming after me for that, okay? So I'm just reading the messages, I promise.
Right.
We have another question. It says, we are about to take the plunge in our state, which is Washington, around co-requisites, particularly for statistics. Do you have an opinion to offer about this approach compared to offering a standalone one-course prerequisite for stats and then an intro to stats course?
Yeah, great question. I'm glad you asked. When I was doing this webinar, I actually had a slide in originally that said, take 2 minutes and write down skills that students need, mathematical skills that students need to learn statistics. And write a second list down of skills students need, quantitative skills for students to learn science classes like chemistry. If you make those lists, generally the stat list is very short. It's proportional reasoning, percents are important, maybe a little bit of graphing sense, but really not much algebra is involved there. However, the science list does involve some algebra by and large, sometimes pretty strong algebra. So for me, having a co-requisite class to stat is a way to avoid developmental mathematics is not supporting student success in the long term. There are reasons to believe that students that go through that will be challenged in those science classes when they could have been better served by a separate math class. I mean, it's a small price to pay to get students ready for all their quantitative needs in one class, as opposed to having to run into problems here and there along the way. So I'm not a fan of co-requisite work, especially in statistics. Even our quantitative reasoning class, which has a little more algebraic basis to it, I don't think we need a co-requisite model there.
Okay, are the co-support courses mandatory hours? So when you talked about like the 4 versus the 6, are those mandatory hours for the students?
In our current system, yes, this Math 106 students are required to be there 6 hours. They don't really see a choice because they're signed up in different sections. Okay. And this model of the future, the way it might look, that's an institutional choice, whether it makes that required or not. Most people think about this are leaning towards making those things required for students for whom there's an identified need, rather than letting students flounder and figure out later they should have been there. But it's a tough thing for all of us to deal with. If I was choosing, I would probably make them required and have some exceptions, but it's a tough thing.
Okay. Another question about the enrollment that says the increase in college level enrollment from 30% to 60%. Has that increase been roughly equally across the QR stats and college algebra, or has there been one area that's been a little bit higher than the others?
The QR and stat has been the largest growth business for us. It's been a coincidence of different factors, including the quantitative reasoning class being used by health careers. They used to use college algebra more, so there was a shift there. Lansing Community College also has a unique college algebra structure. We have a college algebra course, which is not Precalculus, and a separate Precalculus 1 course, which is Precalculus. So we have a lot of students in this college algebra that's not for calculus course, because this has a higher pass rate and transfers to enough places to be a good course for programs to choose. So we've got a little bit of an artificial thing going on there with enrollment because of that second college algebra course. But most of it would still be there. We'd probably be at 55% instead of 60% if that one course wasn't there. But it's been pretty well spread out.
Okay, I've got one more question. Then you probably are going to need to wrap up.
Yeah.
So it says, is there no longer room for courses like contemporary math or the nature of math? Those classes really don't need any remediation and could just take them at the college level.
Well, depends. The answer depends on what you see as the goal of our work. If you have a goal of getting students through a college program and they get their BA degree, oh, sure, those have a good purpose in life. If you want to prepare them to actually do things with quantitative information, you probably don't see those as being that useful. Since they don't have a math prerequisite, they don't really lead to much. They're kind of an end of the path thing, like some people treat a liberal arts math class. I don't use that phrase because LAM is tending to be that kind of not so useful in other courses kind of stuff. It might be useful in interpreting politics, but not in other classes. So, great questions. I'm really glad because I'd be wondering if anything was getting through to everybody. So hopefully that's been helpful to you as well to have those questions. Also, here's a prediction. I think our traditional development math classes have a limited lifespan, 5 years at most. We've got strong forces that are pushing us. We will not be able to stop it, no matter how strongly we think they will serve students, which means the survival of the standalone dev math and prep courses depends on our professional work, developing a better, more positive message that we can sell to our administrators and our students about what we're about. We need to particularly a better image for this co-requisite remediation. Thinking more here about our purposes, our problems. Do we want students to get out of math quickly, or do we want to get students into STEM programs? And the last thing here is other courses at college level are the next field of dreams where we can play. Where do we want that work to go? And that's really all about the mathematics, keeping it up to date, modern, and serving the needs of our students. So, as closing, I really appreciate you've done a great job, everybody, with questions and paying attention. I appreciate your input and questions. And if I can help you in any way, don't hesitate to send me an email. My blog site is there where I tend to post a lot of things too. So thanks, everybody.
Jack, I think we've got time for one more question, at least one more came in. And it was, how common is your course structure among other Michigan community colleges? Has it caught on in Michigan?
No, not so much. We did a little research this winter about other community colleges, and most community colleges in Michigan still have a traditional pathway. Some of them offer pathways in the sense I use today, a methodicity or something like it to get your students ready for statistics. But most of them for students that need STEM courses are still offering pre-algebra, beginning algebra, intermediate algebra, and sometimes an arithmetic class prior to that pre-algebra, straight out of the 1960s. I'm sure they're doing a great job, but it's not such a good math program.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and I have a few things to wrap up, so don't leave even though Jack's done. Feel free to thank him in the chat window before he signs off here today. That would be awesome.
Yeah, and thank you, everybody. I appreciate it.
Okay, a little bit of business here. So thank you so much for participating in today's AMATIC webinar. If you would like to support future AMATIC webinars, please consider becoming a member of AMATIC. You can go to bit.ly/join-AMATIC. We are on social media. We have a Facebook group for AMATIC, as well as all of your regional vice presidents would love you to join their page, I am sure. They have little competitions about how many people are signed up in there. So go ahead and add yourself to that too. That'd be great. Past recordings of AMATIC webinars can be found at bit.ly/AMATIC-webinars. It typically takes a week or two to get this produced, uploaded, and I will let you know as soon as it is made available. And Jack, are your slides going to be available to us too for all the links
slides?
and stuff?
Well, I will post them on my website, blog site.
Okay.
And we can post a link to that wherever you want.
Okay, super, super. Please take 2 minutes to evaluate the webinar and the content. I went ahead and put a QR code in here this time to see if that catches on and anyone's fancy. If you've got a QR reader, you can just put your phone up there and it'll zap on there. You can also go to bit.ly/AMATIC69. And I am going to put the link into the chat box here for you as well. Maybe not. There we go. I know, I always kind of struggle with that one, and it's always, we're waiting. It's hard for me to go between all the screens. So perfect. So take care of that. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording at this point, but we won't sign off quite yet.